Welcome, active spirits and genuine philosophers, to Sessions of Spirit number 22. For those who are just joining us, we're making every session start from the top and run through the previous session, so you have some context on where you're coming into this foray of wisdom. So I'm going to do this in 2 minutes, and hopefully you get the gist of where we are. So I'm just going to put my timer on, and it shouldn't take very long. You're going to be entering something called the circle of reason. And no matter what kind of situation you're in, particularity you're in, what kind of philosophy you love, even if you're religious or an artist, there is a place for you in the circle of reason. Okay, and go. So session 1 was about Hegel being the greatest philosopher because he summed up in an act of humility 3,000 years of philosophers and gave them credit. Session number 2 is that nobody understood that for 200 years. Session 3 is once you do understand it, Hegel empowers your spirit to change the world. Number 4 is that you get beyond the stereotypes of him in the first negation, and you get to the second negation. The 5th session is about starting at Hegel's true beginning with this circle of reason. Number 6 is that the circle of reason sort of looks religious at the end. Genuine philosophy is the sublation of religion, not just the negation. With number 7, a universal logic that we're going to put into analytic notation or modern notation to win the Nobel Peace Prize. Number 8 is that this universal logic starts with polemics, but it's only the first negation. The 9th session is that the truth of this polemic is the polemic of polemics as sublation. The 10th is a masterclass in that kind of sublation, which is Hegel's science of logic. The 11th is that the science of logic is way more profound than people think. It is literally the ineffable speaking itself. The 12th is that the purpose of life is this universal logic. The 13th session is that it liberates your spirit, and that you're supposed to do this with everybody universally on earth. When you do this, session 14 is this feeling of connection with a god or the god. But session 15 is about how this God doesn't have to be theistic or religious. It can be atheistic and connecting to your higher self. 16 is about our gurus. We're just doing this through time. They're implicitly the science of logic. The 17th is that we have to sublate old mysticism with the new mysticism, which is genuine philosophy and the power of now. The 18th is that the limit of our dialectical reason is the limit of our presence and our fun and flowing, because genuine philosophy, number 19, is supposed to be full of humor and it's supposed to be fun. And that leads to 20, the ideal philosopher who's supercharged with the document of philosophies, and he's going to sublate, or she's going to sublate, or they're going to sublate all these religions and all these philosophies of history. And 21 is that doing this over and over again is how we overcome this concept of evil, which is just ignorance in its ideal form. And the wisdom quiz is supposed to help solve that problem and bring us to genuine philosophy, not abstract philosophy. So that was about 2 minutes. I hope you were sort of caught up. That leads us to today's session number 22, SOS. SOS stands for Sessions of Spirit, but also Save Our Souls, because genuine philosophy is also practical. We do stuff with it to make the world better. That's what wisdom is for. Today's session is called Playing God with CRISPR, Lessons in Morality and Ethics. The one paragraph summary goes like this. Is there an objective morality in ethics, or is it all relative? The answer is both. They are relative because humans are finite, but with the universal principles of philosophy extracted from history, we see a reflection of spirit in ourselves. This progress distilled through history in the medium of pure thought is the unchangeable in the changeable, the permanence in the impermanence of which an objective morality can provide stability. This is the idea of the good. The absolute idea carries itself forward as an objective logic that is discovered through our finitude, and so is relative to our abilities in extracting it by the process of infinite science, a science which completes and grounds itself. Hegel brilliantly shows this development not only through a contingent human history, or through contingent human history, but by stitching the principles of the greatest philosophers of all time together in a concrete whole. One example is how, through Aristotle's eudaimonia, universal consciousness develops into abstract right, morality, family life, civil life, and ultimately Kant's principle of duty. This sense of scientific morality in the scientific spiritual ethical sphere is not only a theoretical spirit, but a practical one. A practical one where the role of the state is also towards the idealization for all and the sharing of the value from discovering new ideas. One of those ideas is beginning to reach power so universal as to approximate what the Bible used to attribute to the life-giving and creative power of God, and before that, gods. This one idea should be considered in its true philosophical ramifications in both a scientific and spiritual sense as the modern day equivalent to the elixir of life. This idea is CRISPR. As usual, that is a mouthful. Let us unpack this and get into the notes. So if you follow the notes, they should be free wherever you found this session, whether it's on YouTube, Discord. We're live streaming all over the place now, and potentially the world by the time you see this, because the world spirit is quite powerful. So yesterday, or the previous session, a day or two ago, we talked about the ethical must be resolved as ignorance being overcome with reason, and that this is the way to the good. But this kind of reason we're talking about isn't the abstract kind of reason that's in opposition to art and isn't in sort of like objection or in opposition to emotions or intuition or mysticism or all that kind of fun stuff. This kind of reason is universal logic. And this concept of sublation is this sort of living movement of like logical life that's inherent in everything that's rational. We're going to put this into a profound new notation, modern notation, because Hegel was about 200 years, he's about 200 years old. But we're going to win the Nobel Peace Prize with this kind of logic, because it really is the way to the ethical and the moral, and in a way that we can actually determine, that we can actually use today. But there's something else that won the Nobel Prize, one of the Nobel Prizes, not in peace, but in chemistry. And it's this technology called CRISPR. And in the industry of chemistry and in science in general, we are lacking this universal logic. We have what's called abstract logic, little chopped up bits of fragmented logic. And it is these fragments that are leading to this one-sidedness that we talked about in the last session that leads to this ignorance, which in religious language is called evil. It makes you act from a different kind of logic that's not universal, a particular hyper-individualized logic where we're othering each other and we're each other's enemies and we don't know how to self-recognize with each other. So what does that create? That creates negation. That creates this opposition, this tension where people might fight and kill each other over such things as CRISPR, because CRISPR is a $1 trillion technology and it's literally only just getting started. Already $1 trillion valuations. So we need to sublate this one-sidedness as ideal philosophers. Remember, ideality is about seeing the concrete whole and everything in its right place on the circle of reason. If you're just joining us, these might sound unusual, but you can go back to the free sessions and find out what we mean by these concepts. But we're really concerned about the practical potential of this technology because it is so incredibly potent. It is not being run by genuine philosophers right now. It's literally just being run by what's called finite scientists, and they're not operating in this mode of infinite science. And these technologies like CRISPR are so powerful that it's literally like playing God. We are literally tapping into our DNA and figuring out how to change it. So if you don't know what CRISPR is, I'm going to give you some facts to allow you to grasp the immensity that is not being portrayed in the public media. And this is partly because academia is very sterile and it tries to not be sensationalist, because we're trying to break out of the religious mode, which had a lot of sensuous particularities and imagination that brought us away from the pure thoughts of philosophy. But what we're doing is we're returning to these pure thoughts in this concrete, mystical, speculative totality, which brings that life back in without all these sort of superstitions and the things that bring us into this sort of psychosis of like ungrounded reasoning. That's not to say it can't be beautiful, but in terms of the of like running a state and these technologies like CRISPR and bringing them under wisdom, we need something that's clear. Philosophy is about clear thinking. So let me make this clear for you. CRISPR is a genetic editing tool that's like a pair of scissors that can go into your DNA and literally hijack the natural mechanisms of your cellular immune response. So we're not just talking about your immune response with your lymph nodes and the big glands. Each cell has a immune response in it. It has a spacer and it has a protein that can go and snip foreign bacteria's DNA that comes into the cell membrane. It detects it, swims, cuts, and it takes that piece of DNA and it stores it in the spacer so that it can replicate, cellular response to any foreign bodies like that in a much more efficient way. So it can go and kill that bacteria or whatever entered the cell. So we have figured out a way, of course, to hijack this and use it for editing anything in the DNA and putting in anything we want. It's not just snipping out, but because we've hijacked the natural cellular mechanisms, the cell has built-in safety devices that make sure that when it's being edited, it heals itself. And so we're using this mechanism with CRISPR now to go in. We can read DNA very precisely. Sometimes it misses. It's called off-target editing, but it's incredibly more precise than what we were trying to do before with these artificial zinc fingers and stuff like that. You read the DNA and you can find a place where you want to snip it. You take this like snipping nuclease mechanism, snip it out, and you can put in any DNA you want. And then when you snip it in there, the cell will heal itself and it'll incorporate that DNA. This means that you can basically change the instructions of life. So CRISPR, this is why the title of the talk is called playing God, but it's also, the elixir of life, the modern day elixir of life. And we've named our Facebook group after this because, it sounds like science fiction, but it's really not. And if you look at the comments here, what I've left for you is a couple of articles. And one of them is from this guy named Dr. David Liu. I think I'm saying his name right. He's a scientist from Harvard. And he has a TED Talk that you can go and watch. And this TED Talk is him talking about how he can't even believe what he's doing. They supercharged CRISPR with what's called prime editing. And he's literally saying, if you would have told me I would be doing this 5 years ago, and this was 2019, I think is when he gave this talk. So in around 2014 to 2015, he said he wouldn't have believed you. He said, what science fiction are you reading? Now he's doing it. So not only can the public not grasp what is happening, but even the experts who know the technical details are sitting back wondering if this is a dream, because we're moving so quickly. And because the technology is natural, because we're using natural cellular mechanisms, it's moving even faster than we thought, because it's safer than we thought, because we're literally tapping into nature. So there is a profoundness to the logic of nature. And despite us talking previously about how nature has this irrationality to it, what's beautiful in nature is that it does have this reasoning coming through it. And this is a powerful example of how we're utilizing it. But the scary thing is we're not sure if we're as wise to do this properly, but we're bridging into this territory of what God used to do, creating organisms, taking the rib out of Adam in terms of Christianity. We can grow ribs, like we can start doing incredible things. So this guy, David Liu, is quite respectable, and he's even blown away by how incredible this is. It's literally science fiction come true. But to supercharge this even more, his crew figured out how to change not just genes. So genes are like little chunks of DNA, right? Not even just to change genes, but change the individual base pairs. So DNA is a double helix, right? And it has little bars in between it. And they change. There's like 4 different combinations, I think. And a gene is made up with these bars, these base pairs. We can change one of those. And there's 3 or 4 billion of those in your DNA. Every single human being has roughly 3 to 4 billion of these base pairs. That's what makes up your body. It's incredibly miraculous. And they figured out how to edit one of them, one by one. It's incredible. It's called prime editing. This basically means that we can if you look at the next point here, we can literally grow and cure anything. So right now, if you go and look online, there's a database of human genetic diseases, and basically all diseases are some version of something goes wrong with the genetics, or a foreign body comes in and starts messing with your genetics and your organs. There's about 75,000 of them. They're all just aberrations in these base pairs. Either they're deleted, they're in the wrong order, there's something is wrong. So prime editing can go in and fix all of it. And it's not like, this is 3 years ago now, so they've made a lot of progress, but it's not, we're theoretically able to cure all these diseases now, right? But there's still some work to be done to actually do it. So if you look at the comments here, people are going to be screaming and saying that this is not real science, Mark. You are taking this out of context and sensationalizing it. Well, no, I'm not. So here is another quote in the comments of David talking about, yes, we can cure 89% of these pathological mutations that are in the database already with what they have. But there's still 11% that they can't cure. And he says he himself in his quote talks about how people on Twitter are misquoting him, and they're saying that, you know, this is not the same as curing them right away, or, you know, they're sensationalizing it, which sounds like what I'm doing. But when you look into this comment more, what he's saying is that what's holding them back is literally just finding a way to deliver what they've already figured out into the cell. So just the technology itself, yes, if you can get this to the DNA, it will do the 89% curing right away. It's just getting it past the cell membrane, past the disease. Like in cystic fibrosis, there's a bunch of mucus that covers the cells you need to edit. So they have to figure out a way to get past the mucus and get into the cells, right? And they're figuring this out at blazing speed too. They're using like virus shells. They're using fat layers, like they're called lipids, like little containers of fat that can kind of squeeze in through cell membranes and open up. They're using optogenetics. They're using light beams to try and get them in there. There's incredible things happening, like literally science fiction. And it's only a matter of time until we figure out how to get the prime editing, the nuclease and stuff into the cells. It's only a matter of time. So he's sounding really conservative, but this is literally the most conservative way to talk about this you can possibly get, without saying that we literally are going to cure all human disease. Because if you say that and you're a Harvard scientist, it's going to make you look so crazy that your reputation might actually get destroyed or tainted. So these guys are being really careful. You know, it's like handling a hot potato. And then he goes on to say, well, what about these other 11%? You know, we can't cure all of it. So there's something that this stuff can't do. But then look at the next part of the paragraph here. And he's saying what's holding them back from this 11% isn't that they can do it. It's that there's a unknown to the size. And once they figure out the sizing, they'll be able to cure that 11% too. So it's really just him saying, yes, we can do it all. We have to fix a couple of things that are really tricky. They're not going to be super easy, but we can figure them out. It's only a matter of time. So this really is this incredible. This is the elixir of life. This is the cure to all human disease in terms of biological suffering. That's not blunt force trauma, or like even PTSD, even like bipolar mental disorders. We can go in and edit the neurons and make them start producing proper hormonal balances again. Now, of course, this has to be done properly, or else you can really cause problems. And that's why we want the experts to be doing this, and they are. They're doing it very carefully, and it's a highly regulated industry. But that's incredible in and of itself, right? I want to go one step further and really get into the philosophy of what this means. As philosophers and genuine philosophers, we have to be able to think concretely. What does this mean in terms of the scope of all human science? Well, not only can we cure all known human diseases right now, at least theoretically, there's thinking in the next 5 to 10 years, this will actually start happening in practice. It's already happening now. But we have even turned aging into a disease because it's now curable. Yes, this is also the cure for aging. Not only to stop aging, but to actually start reversing it. because we're mapping out what has caused aging is the cellular replication process has a truncation. It starts snipping out genetic information so that eventually, after about 80 years of replicating, for most people, there's not enough genetic information in there to replicate a new cell, and it dies. And all that damage starts to accumulate, and the cells get weaker, and we can now put that DNA information back into the cell if we know how to do it, where to do it, and with what to do it with. It's only a matter of time. And to make you guys understand that this is still science we're doing here, this is still academia, I am putting in the comment section a link to an article from a couple of years ago. I think this is like 6 years ago now, where Jeff Bezos invested in these companies that claim to cure aging with CRISPR and some other tools. It's not just CRISPR, right? But CRISPR is really, you know, it's incredibly cheap and efficient to do. So in the beginning, as the story goes, they found out about this little company, a few people saying that we can do this anti-aging, and this corporation, Jeff Bezos's representatives, didn't really believe them. And so they said, okay, you know what, there's something missing in your science. We'll give you 50 grand to go in and kind of do a proof of concept to prove this sensational claim. So they did that. They gave 50,000 to these people. And then I think like less than a year later, they gave $116 million to those same people. So whatever they saw was definitely not science fiction. It was worth $116 million just to get started. And remember, this is anti-aging for real. And this is going to lead into reversing of aging. So we're not talking about stopping aging when you're like 90 years old and it's a torturous state where you're sitting there debilitated for eternity. No, you will be able to reverse your aging and live a proper, vital life again. Not only that, but 1,000 IQ is also theoretically possible because we've isolated the 600 genes that families that have hereditary high IQ of about 150 and above. They studied their genetic codes, their genomes, and they isolated this super high IQ to about 600 genes that, of course, because we can edit any genes with CRISPR, as David Liu said, not even just any gene, any base pair, of course, we can edit these 600 and really supercharge whatever makes IQ. So there's theoretical, I wish I had time to find the article. I read the article 2 years ago, but if you go and look it up, there's a guy that's saying that it's possible to have IQs of theoretically 1,000. So maybe we can compete with artificial intelligence in our wetsuits for a while anyway, until the singularity reaches infinity. And if you don't know what the singularity is, go check that out. Because the point of this CRISPR talk is to show you that these things are moving fast, really fast. Sounds incredible, okay? So I want to point out something that makes this more practical. And that's that in point F here, there's a company that has figured out how to barcode our DNA to start making this economical, to start charging money and getting the economics figured out. And this company is called Inscripta. And the link that I provide you there is straight from the horse's mouth. The CEO of this company is talking about this stuff directly. We're not talking about conspiracy theory. We're literally talking about respectable academics and professionals. So I'm trying to give you the most academic sources I can, because if we don't do that, there's going to seem like there's a one-sidedness. And of course, one-sidedness leads to evil and ignorance. So we need to start communicating with sublation immediately. So my goal here with this talk is to empower you to go out and spread this new genuine philosophy, but also to protect you from the negations that are going to happen. Because the default mode of the universal logic, when people aren't genuine philosophers, is abstract negation. They will cancel you or try to. So this information will hopefully start dissolving the one-sidedness of the sensationalism that's in this, the science fiction and the conspiratorial nature of it, and balances it with the academia, the professionalism, the peer-reviewed studies, the accounting of confirmation bias, and all these types of things that we know are inherent in our thinking when we're not being philosophical. So we're going to barcode the DNA. They're going to barcode the DNA so they can scan which corporations edited you. So if somebody edits you and they're not one of the big corporations, they can go and sue you or something. Like the whole politics, our political system is going to get in on this. And as you know, our political systems were tested by the pandemic and we squeezed through. That's a testament to the human spirit. But there is a lot of problems that makes technologies like CRISPR incredibly scary. as we're going to talk about right after I keep proving to you the facts of how incredible this is. In the next section, that CEO of Inscripta introduces a system that they designed called Onyx. And people are saying, yes, Mark, yes, this stuff is going to happen, but it's 20, 30, 40. I'll be dead by the time this stuff happens, 40 years away. No, guys and girls, and it's theys, thems, thous, beyond non-binaries. This includes everybody. These guys have figured out how to reduce costs by 200 times already, increase efficiencies by 100 times, increase cellular range by 10,000 times. We're talking about making multiple edits simultaneously across the entire human genome with one system. Watch the video. He explains to you how they do that. It's absolutely incredible. It's just mind-blowing. It is so incredible. It's making me wonder why we're not talking about it. So now you have a little bit of materials to go out and tell people and say, no, this actually is this incredible and it is moving this fast now. Barcoding DNA, hundreds of percents of returns on the increase of this technology. Not only this, we have already edited the first human embryos. So they might say, well, you're only editing plants and animals. There's years away. No, some guy has already edited human embryos to make them HIV resistant because the mother had HIV and they were afraid it was going to transmit to the babies. So this kind of rogue scientist, a pure heart, went to jail for this because he was in China, I think, and it's regulated, right? But he thought that he would be doing good in the world by showing that this is possible and it's moving this fast. And in some ways, it's good that he did it because he's sounding the alarm that if it's happening with him, it's happening somewhere else in the world with billionaires or somebody with private labs, okay? We're creating designer babies already, it's happening. Wouldn't you want to do it if you knew your child was going to have sickle cell anemia or was going to have like some kind of horrible debilitating disease that was going to make their life torturous? You know what? It's you know, it gets to you, especially as a mother or as a parent in general or as a caretaker. So this has already happened. We're not just talking theoretically, already done. So now the more legal way of it being done is concluding this year. So the FDA is fast tracking this stuff. And we've already done the first human trials completely. So that means stage 1, 2, and 3. So the short-term, middle-term, and long-term studies. So the long-term studies are completing now on 2 major diseases. Millions of people are suffering from these things. And it's called beta thalassemia and sickle cell anemia. These have been cured in about 80 people. Out of these, I think there's 70 to 80 people. Out of this group of people, only 2 of them didn't have 100% cure. And this is like long-term. This is after a year, still cured. So they're about to publish the results. I put if you look in the comments, I give you the article where I read this, and you can go look it up for yourself. Phys.org is a very reputable academic source. So I'm trying to give you guys these types of materials. Oh, I didn't. Shoot, guys, I did put the comment, but I must not have saved. I'll put that there for you later. The next one, though, is that, yes, this isn't just for humans in healthcare. We are doing this with plants, animals, humans, maybe even aliens, whatever we create. You can synthesize plant DNA with human DNA. So you can do a lot of stuff now. And it is all happening all at once. So there's a couple of articles about these breakthroughs in agriculture where they've, you know, when you do GMO stuff, they have to do these like crazy concoctions, and then hopefully one of them will take, and then they kind of hope that did what it was supposed to. And that's why the whole GMO movement is scary. CRISPR is different from GMO. We're not doing these monstrous sort of like experiments and hoping something works out. You can go in with precision and edit what you want. And with a couple of off-target edits, it's a lot more manageable. So we're perfecting the science, and they're able to do now, I think he said the breakthrough is that they did 13 generations of experiments in like 3 months or something, which would have taken like years and years and years to do with the old GMO ways of, you know, Frankensteining it, Monsanto style. So this is the benefit of CRISPR, and it's happening very quickly all over the place. The billionaire class, the people that are in the know, they are already investing in this. We, the public, are the ones that are lagging. So this is where our sort of hero comes in, Jennifer Doudna, the angel of CRISPR, I call her. She's one of the co-founders. And this is sort of a feminist victory because women often don't get Nobel Prizes. In the 100 or 150 years since the Nobel Prize was started, I think we've had like 800 awards or something like that. and women have only won like 50, I think. Don't quote me on that. It's been a while since I looked it up, but 2 women shared the Nobel Prize for CRISPR this past year or two. And Jennifer Doudna is realizing that we don't have the maturity and the political policy globally to handle something like CRISPR. So she, as a scientist, got out of her comfort zone. She like, people in labs are usually a little bit more introverted and stuff like this. That's the stereotype, not 100% true. But she kind of came out of her shell and started sounding the alarm and saying, we have a responsibility as researchers to not just do the research, but educate the public on what we are researching and what it means. So since the technology was invented in 2013, it's been about, well, what is it now? Almost 9 years. They say that the labs have been doubling. So back in 2013, I think there was like 27 labs or something like that working on CRISPR related tech. Now there's like 4,300 or maybe even more, maybe 5,000. It's like doubling. Like previous to the 4,000, there was 2,000. So it's like moving very quickly. And she decided to move very quickly and talk very openly about her concerns as a professional. So she went on Big Think, which is a sort of science public forum to get pop science understanding CRISPR. So she said she had a dream where she dreamed of a pig Hitler, a horrible, monstrous combination that, of course, represents what you can do with CRISPR. And if you do it the wrong way, it could lead to these horrific incidents that we've seen in history, a disconnection from spirit, a disconnection from wisdom. So in the last couple of minutes here, I just want to say she's on the right path. I think we need to follow her example. So this is where I started to get activated as a genuine philosopher, trying to be a genuine philosopher. I'm just following her lead and saying we need to get the public going, because her number one concern is not the tech itself. Yes, the Hitler, the monster things. She's concerned that even once it gets developed, we're not going to have access to it. The average person won't have access to it because it's so powerful, and because wealth concentration is so extreme. The upper class of our species, the people who are supposed to be our guardians, are trapped in this draconian system of hyper competition and this race to the bottom. They're trapped just like we are. So they're going to, by necessity, use the technology to hypercharge their competitiveness. And it probably whatever trickles down to the rest of us will be so expensive, because it's so valuable, that we could probably spend our whole lives working to pay off 1 or 2 cures. So this accessibility problem is her number one concern. So I give you a link here of her talking about it, but there's another one where she's specifically saying that is her like central. That's why she's doing all these talks every year. She's doing tons of interviews. And now that she's supercharged with the Nobel Prize, people will really listen to her. And we're very lucky that this is the kind of person that's leading the movement. We're very lucky because she's trying to be this kind of more concrete philosopher. She's trying to say, oh, philosophy is not just, theoretical. She's being practical about it. And that's what Hegel also says is what real philosophy is about. Theoretical spirit, practical spirit, they sublate into freedom of spirit. She's getting quick. She's getting activated very quickly because COVID has also supercharged the investment in genomic research, on top of the FDA realizing that these natural built-in mechanisms of safety for CRISPR allows them to fast track this type of research even more quickly than we thought. This is a true Kuhnian exemplar. This is revolutionary science, not just reformist science. This is going to change everything. It's going to change the healthcare system as we know it. Nurses' lives are going to be affected. The whole political spectrum is going to be upended. This is truly disruptive technology. People say, well, don't worry, it's regulated in Canada. There's this ban on what is it called? There's somatic edits, which don't pass down to your progeny. They don't go down to your children. But then there's the editing that you can do, like germline editing, which does get down to your children. It goes on forever down your line, right? So people think it's regulated, we're safe, but it's regulated for profit maximization, right? So once it is safe, that's not the concern of Jennifer Doudna. She's saying it will eventually become safe and it will happen. But the problem is that it's not happening in a way where we're going to have access reasonably for most people. We're not going to, we have profit maximization. We don't have spirit liberation. We don't have spirit maximization. That's what we're going to come in to change. We're going to try and change the regulations to embrace these principles of universal, infinite importance of everybody. So without a lot of time to go into this, Hegel brilliantly sublates this sort of ancient Greek version of the purpose of life, which is eudaimonia, this sort of self-happiness. And he says, you have to have this moment of self-happiness to kind of liberate yourself into the state life, into where you're in universal relationships of law and legal status with other individuals. And the law is sort of the universal logic kind of bursting into explicitness so that we can sort of regulate ourselves in community and achieve this kind of duty, a duty to the state. But what's missing, and what Jennifer Doudna is freaking out about, is that our duty to the state needs to be reciprocated by the duty of the state back to us to protect our spirits and our individual freedoms. That piece is missing, especially at the global level. So if we do have to create a global structure to regulate CRISPR from this draconian hyper competition of unregulated capitalism, we need to sublate that. We need to overcome that, or else we're going to get this race to the bottom. And so if we're going to create a state like that, it needs to be in this universal concrete logic that Hegel talks about, where the spirit of it actually stays alive. So I did give you a couple of quotes here from Hegel. I did talk about this kind of immense sublation between eudaimonia, 2,000 years of like the first version of the purpose of history and morality, and then Kant's version for the last 200 years. We've sublated those, and Hegel gives a pretty profound progression through all the political structures of our lives, even the family. But there's a concept called conscience that he talks about. And conscience is a tricky situation for spiritual people, particularly because they say, well, the truth is in me. If I'm spirit, then I decide my moral laws. I'm a free agent. But Hegel says there's a contradiction here, that we have to universalize the logic that's in us. We have to explicate it into what becomes civil society and state life. Because conscientiousness leads to this sort of arbitrariness where you don't know, maybe you do have the universals inside you, but you don't know how to verify that. You need this sort of community dynamic to sort of perform the scientific verification and determinations of these objective universals that aren't just relative to your individuality. So this is where we move morality into its scientific form. And we overcome this opposition between science and morality, or science and spirituality, where it's been said that science can't say anything about what we should have as morality. We have to define that for ourselves. No, Hegel says that's only the beginning stages before you grasp the universal logic. When you grasp the universal logic, which we know is dialectic, right? It is the same logic from from ontology and metaphysics straight up into physics, straight up into chemistry, biology, consciousness itself, psychology, and even sociology and state dynamics, culture itself, and philosophy itself. It's all the same logic. And it can, when you grasp it clearly, it can tell you what is objectively correct in our society, what is right, and what is best for people who are in this universal state, this ideal rational state. So we're sort of at the end of our time here. You can look up the quotes where Hegel says that conscientiousness leads to this hypocrisy. We are going to experience this because people that aren't in the movement are going to negate us, right? And usually it happens by this sort of conscientious, kind of like, I'm too good to get involved with floss and get my hands dirty. I am this pure thinker. I don't want to do this CRISPR stuff. This is a bunch of woo-woo. Hegel says that this happens because the heroes of the movement, it's not because the heroes aren't heroes, it's because other people are like valets. They don't yet realize what is happening. So they pick out your flaws and they negate you based on these flaws. And they kind of stay floating away. Remember the benign violation theory of humor, you can create distance, right? So this is their way of creating distance while negating, creating that separation. You have to be prepared for this. It's happening to me already. People are coming to my live feeds. So I got like 5 or 6 live feeds going to speed up to supercharge the spirit, like Jennifer Doudna says, get the public aware. I will talk to anyone that comes in, but you have to be prepared to sublate their negations. If you return their abstract negations, you fall into one side in this too, and a sort of evil dynamic unfolds where you try and destroy each other. But really, it's just ignorance. So the only way to solve this is by sublating into a higher level of reasoning that takes the truth of both and grasps them simultaneously while canceling their limit. Okay, so as ideal philosophers, this is going to happen because once you start telling people CRISPR is the elixir of life, they're going to look at you with like they're going to look at you sideways. Be prepared also that when we say CRISPR Citizen Labs, what we're going to practically do with this philosophy is we're going to create labs for ourselves. We're going to call them CRISPR Citizen Labs, but don't mistake this citizen word to mean do it yourself. We're not going to take CRISPR and tell you go do this in your garage and cure diabetes. No, this could go horribly, horribly wrong. What we're going to do is we're just going to change the ownership structures of the labs from this private model that corporations are using to siphon incredible amounts of value off of us, because wealth concentration at the global level is at all-time highs. It's going to continue unless we do something different in the spirit of economics and politics. So we can start our own labs that the citizens own as a cooperative model that will allow us to give the technology guaranteed as a benefits package to the workers of the labor app of self-actualization that Hegel and Marx talks about. That's what we mean by citizen labs, okay? So we're not being naive. It will be an open science model so the public can come in and learn. And if they want to get a degree in it, they can start working for the labs too. That's something you need to be clear on because people will come and negate you on that and say you're naive. But as philosophers, we're about concrete, thorough thinking, right? Universal logic. That should hopefully empower you. And if you have any other questions, please ask me. We've already talked to a few lab experts, people who have started cancer labs. I have a few friends, they've told me that it's literally impossible to compete. So we cannot compete in the ordinary sense because there's no money if you're not an established organization from the government. You won't get any grants. And the only other place is to go to venture capitalists who have all the money. But of course, if you get into the private mode, you're just participating in that siphoning. So what we need to do is literally rely on grassroots movements. We are literally relying on nothing but the pure vitality and motivation of spirit that is inside of people. You know, the spirit of a team. We're literally going to create a new spirit and bring out that motivation and inspire people to give small amounts of money to crowdfund our first CRISPR labs and break out of this trap that money is usurped by structures of power that aren't connected to this universal logic or this universal spirit. This is our true duty to each other. The vow of unabandonment is realizing that everybody is rational. Everybody deserves this CRISPR stuff. Everybody, because Hegel says that if you grasp logic, it's inherent and immanent in everything, including you, including criminals, including people who have made mistakes. That's why we philosophically have a right and a duty to give it to everybody and not abandon them with this power. This is a true exemplar. It's not the only exemplar. There's artificial intelligence. There's lots of things that are happening at a disruptive rate. So this talk is telling you guys we are moving as a species in an incredible direction with CRISPR, but we're doing this with almost every technology. So really time is of the essence. I'm doing these talks for free to help you get the information, ask any questions. We just have to start moving efficaciously. Wise, but fast. Okay, that's efficacious, efficient, but intelligently. So if you want to participate in this new spirit of sublation, this is the ultimate disruptive technology that we're introducing. It's a disruption that is no disruption because sublation is about the negation of negation. It's about an integrating and it's a harmonious sort of science, an infinite science that brings everything into its right order on the circle of reason. So if you want to get involved, yes, please ask your questions on the Hegelians who want to change the world group. We named it that because we want it to be practical and theoretically sound. Please take the wisdom quiz because that will check your one-sidedness. And if you want to be an admin, we need to make sure you're masterful with sublations or else you'll fall into abstract negation and sort of hurt the spirit. And then look at the synchronicity document of philosophies and start putting all those abstract philosophies in the columns so we can start sublating them. That's the master document to supercharge our ideal philosopher abilities across any culture, across any of the 200 nations where CRISPR is starting to build. And if you really want to, you can join the CRISPR, the Elixir of Life Facebook group and focus directly on CRISPR itself. The Facebook group is there. And tomorrow we're going to pick up how we really grasp this universal logic in a much more clear way to supercharge ourselves even more to sort of race this kind of CRISPR disruption in a meaningful way, in a way where we do it quick enough that it is actually going to make changes for everybody before it's too late. And I don't want to be a doom and gloom, but it's pretty serious and we have a chance to do some really good work in the world. Okay, we're a bit over time. Thank you for staying. If you have any questions, I'm going to keep the this room open because I paid for it now. And I'm going to stop recording so that you can feel free in asking your questions without people negating you when this video goes international. So thank you for coming. If you're watching from anywhere around the world, from any country, keep sublating and stay wise.